Hello and welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB, and today we are looking at new cards from the new set, Murders at Karlov Manor. What cards will make an impact on the standard metagame? It's a standard review. We're reviewing for standard. I don't know if you know that, but it's standard, and we're talking about standard and cards that can be impactful in standard. If you want to know what I think will be a commander card or a limited card, stay till the end. But, you know, standard. First card is Aelia, the Law Above, 3 and a red-white for 4/4 legendary angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. And whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aelia, the Law Above, deals 3 damage to each of your opponents and you gain 3 life. Am I putting this card on the list because of the attacks with 5 or more creatures clause with the lightning helix attached? No, I am not. Am I doing it because attacking with 3 creatures draws you a card? No, I am not. I am putting it in this section strictly for the 5 mana for 4/4 flying, vigilance, haste. I think that just that right there can end a lot of games. And if your deck is going into any kind of a Boros mid-rangey zone, you don't need any other creatures on the battlefield doing anything for this to be a good card. But those other abilities do raise the ceiling of the card, particularly in Commander. So I think Aelia Law Above in the right deck, probably a 1 of or a 2 of, is already very, very good. The next card is the Case of the Getaway Express, 1 and a white. When this case enters the battlefield, choose target creature you don't control. Each creature you control deals 1 damage to that creature. To solve, 3 or more creatures attack this turn, and solved is creatures you control get +1/+0. Cases are a new type of enchantment. Solving them means strictly meeting the requirement at some point. Solves happen at the beginning of your end step, so it doesn't kick in right away. The reason I like this card is because it's sneaky removal stapled to an anthem. It runs downhill really hard. If you have 3 or more creatures on the battlefield, you can often be playing this for 2 mana, attacking with those creatures, killing what the opponent was relying on to be their blocker out of the way, and then in the future you have an anthem effect. There are certainly issues with the card. For one thing, it doesn't necessarily play well with Thalia, which is still in the format and will be until September. Tick tick, count the days. And it also doesn't play well against Ward. So if you picture like a graveyard trespasser, that is kind of an annoying thing to deal with. But the card runs downhill so well. If the opponent is on the back foot even a little, being able to remove their creature, attack with your creatures, and then also have an anthem going forward, it seems super powerful to me. So I would expect this to see some play in the format. Case of the Stash Skeleton is 1 in a black, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 2/1 black skeleton creature token and suspect it. When something's suspected, it has menace and it can't block. To solve, you must control no suspected skeletons. And solved is 1 in a black, sack the case and search your library for a card, put into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. And you can't do the search ability until the next turn because it's activate as a sorcery. Those issues aside, the reason I like this is because for 2 mana you get a board presence, a creature that's good at attacking that the opponent will eventually have to care about a little bit at some point. But if they don't, there are other ways to get our skeleton off the field. We can sacrifice it to various effects. One of my favorite is bargain. You can bargain the skeleton token to beseech the mirror, go get yourself a 4 or less card from your deck, cast it for free, and then the next turn sacrifice the case and go tutor again. So if there are specific 2-card combos available in the format at any point, this is a great core to kind of build around that. Analyze the Pollen is 1 green sorcery rare. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you may collect evidence 8. Collecting evidence, exile cards with total mana value 8 or greater from your graveyard. All right, the effect is to search your library for a basic land. Boring. But if evidence was collected, instead search for a creature or land, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. The reason I like this card for standard quite specifically is in the domain deck, you can discard something like your Herd Migration, and then you only need like 1 more mana value worth of card in your graveyard. You can exile those in the domain deck, and you can go get an Atraxa. That's like the ceiling, is you go fetch Atraxa, and the floor is you use it to go fetch another land, and you need all the lands of different types to reduce the cost of your leyline binding and achieve domain anyway. So there might also be other decks specifically built around gathering evidence where this card becomes very good. There's a lot of cheap green cards that fill the graveyard that we'll get to when I talk about one of them, and that deck might also get a lot out of Analyze the Pollen. Sharp-Eyed Rookie is 1 green for a 2/2 Vigilant Human Detective at rare. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if its power is greater than Sharp-Eyed Rookie's power or its toughness is greater than Sharp-Eyed Rookie's toughness, put a counter on Sharp-Eyed Rookie and investigate. This is, in a way, an evolve card. It's also a card advantage engine, as it can get you more clues every turn. It's also generating artifacts, which can make a teething wormlet grow bigger and trigger artifact things in other ways. I feel like this would be a really good card in a lot of metas, and it's only its aggressive greenness that's holding it back here. But if that's all that's holding it back, then maybe it does have the potential to be a powerful card in some way. War Leader's Call is 1 and a red and a white enchantment at rare. Creatures you control get +1/+1, but wait, there's more. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, War Leader's Call deals 1 damage to each opponent. We have a combination of Glorious Anthem, which on its own probably wouldn't see play in Standard, and Impact Tremors, which on its own probably wouldn't see play in Standard. But when you put them both in one card and you combine them with a few other cards in the format, I start to get really excited about this card. I actually think that these kind of cards haven't been good in Standard for a while. The Anthem effects, especially at 3 mana, and Wedding Announcement kind of broke that mold, but this card I think actually builds that archetype up even further, that kind of Convoke, go super wide, Imodane's Recruiter-ish archetype, because now it has reach. All you have to do is get your creatures into play to deal damage to the opponent. So I'm excited to see what War Leader's Call does in Standard. I think it's a very cool card. Breakout is a red and a green sorcery uncommon. Look at the top 6 of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them. If that card has mana value 2 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield and it gains haste until end of turn. If you didn't put the revealed card onto the battlefield this way, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is in a way a curve filler that gets you 6 cards deeper to try to hit your 2-drop, but it can also try to assemble creature combos in the format. There is a creature later coming up in red and green that is specifically a good A+B 3+4 combo card that you might want to assemble with something like Breakout. But we haven't really seen a card like this that can both help fill your curve with the best possible 2 card or set you up for the future, and I'm curious to see how it plays out in Standard. The next card is Insidious Roots. This is a green and a black 2 mana enchantment at uncommon. Creature tokens you control have tap for a mana of any color, and whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token and then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. There aren't a lot of cards in this set that really have the ability to build promising new archetypes, but I think this card falls into that category. It's asking a lot. You need to be filling your graveyard with creatures, and you have to have ways to take those creatures out of the graveyard, but those cards might just exist. Then on the other hand, as far as taking cards out of the graveyard, we have Tyvar. The new Tyvar Planeswalker can pull a creature out of the graveyard, which can trigger this card. It can also untap a creature, which might get you more mana with this. And once you are up to making 2 or 3 plants and they're starting to get very large and you're starting to get a ton of value off this, it is very threatening. You also have access to a lot of mana, and I'm not even sure what you do with that much mana, 5 or 6 mana, but I'm pretty sure it can do something cool. There's also various ways to exile cards from graveyards, whether it's Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Graveyard Trespasser, Lord Skitter. All of these cards can have a pretty good combo going with Insidious Roots, but the payoff could be there. This is a lot of value at a very low price. Ezim Agency Chief is 5 total mana, 1 white, white, blue, blue for a rare 5/5 Archon Detective that is legendary. Flying. And when this enters the battlefield, investigate twice. So you get 2 clues. For 1 mana, you can sack an artifact, and Ezim gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Hexproof until end of turn. Now, this will be better in blue-white control, specifically playing against decks like Mono Red and Gruul, because the ability to grab that Lifelink can completely transform the game. Also, the ability to grab Vigilance and Lifelink can really make for a big swing. You have to have more artifacts to sacrifice eventually, because on its own, this enters and investigates twice. That's not an unlimited supply of artifacts. But there's also things like map tokens lying around. There's probably other ways that we can make this card even more powerful. I think at its core, it might be fun to play 1 or 2 in a control deck, but it's probably a sideboard card. Still, I would be surprised if Ezim never shows up in Standard. I think 1 or 2 of these between main deck and sideboard in some kind of blue whitey or Esper or Bant list will show up at some point. Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna talk about Slime Against Humanity. 2 and a green sorcery common, create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or are named Slime Against Humanity. A deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity. I hate this. I hate cards like this. I hate cards. It started with Plague Rat, but in Standard, this card, there are some things. I think Demonic Bargain is in Standard, which says exile 13 cards at random from your library. This counts cards in exile. It counts the oozes or slimes against humanity in exile. So if you use that card, you might be casting this and making like a 10/10 on your very first go at it. I hate that these cards exist, but for those of you who love them, come at me. Let's make some content. Rubble Belt Maverick is 1 green for a 1/1 human detective common, and when it enters the battlefield, surveil 2. For a green, exile this from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. It's a good smoother in just generic decks. It's a good graveyard filler in graveyard decks and collect evidence decks. And it's a good +1/+1 counter on a stick in a +1/+1 counter deck. I'm sure somewhere at some point, Rubble Belt Maverick will help enable some new things for green, and green needs it. But the real question that must be answered about this card, how did this cat get so many eyes? And do they all get eye gookies? Our next card is Axebane FX. This is 2 green for a 4/4 beast rare death touch haste with a ward to collect evidence 4. We see the ward being used with collect evidence in a different way. For your opponent to target this, they have to exile up to 4 mana value or more worth of mana value from their graveyard. It's weird saying collect evidence. I'm figuring it out. So if that is difficult for the opponent and not a lot of decks are built to just fill up their graveyard, then this card becomes a 4/4 hasty, death touchy, semi-hexproof type effect, which is really good, especially when you combine death touch with trample, which there are a few ways to do in the meta. Audacity comes to mind as a way to give this thing trample and really start plowing through. Also, when you use bite spells with this, the death touch means it can remove just about anything. So once again, we are hoping that green gets good. It has some interesting tools. I think the Axebane FX is a particularly powerful one that might be very annoying for many cards to remove. Hunted Bone Brute is 2 and a black for a 6/2 skeleton beast, menace at rare. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. And when the Bone Brute dies, each opponent loses 3 life. There is a disguise of 1 and a black, so that means you can cast this in a morph type way. For 3 generic mana, you can have a 2/2 ward 2 creature on the battlefield, which is this card face down, and then you can flip it up for its disguise cost, which is 1 and a black. The reason that's pretty cool is because if you cast it on the face down way, the dogs don't happen. If the dogs don't happen, then the opponent doesn't have the free blockers and you're coming in with a 6-2 menace. Now that's a lot of investment and it makes me wonder why this card is on the list. And the biggest thing that comes to mind for me, fight rigging. Fight rigging is a card that has shakedown heavy, and it has Archfiend of Despair and a few other ways to immediately trigger it. Adding another way to trigger it in Hunted Bone Brute I think is pretty good. And honestly, I think that Hunted Bone Brute in some ways might be better than Shakedown Heavy. I like the fact that when it dies, the opponent is going to lose life. Something bad is going to happen to them. And giving them the 2 dog creature tokens can punish you, but you can play around it if you need to. Druids Charm is green, green, green instant at rare. I love that this is a cycle. If you remember Archmage's Charm, you get to choose one and you get sweet options. Search your library for a creature or land card and reveal it. Put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land. Otherwise, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Note, that was any land card, not a basic land. That is very interesting. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So there's a removal spell on there. And exile target artifact or enchantment. Exile. That's very strong. That can exile a 1 ring. I think that this card is going to struggle to see play in standard because of the position of green. However, I'm going to remain optimistic that somehow a deck can be built that can facilitate a card like this that is normally on a modern type power level if you look at what Archmage's Charm was able to do from this position. But there's got to be something for it in standard, and now we're all going to be looking at every spoiler season and every new set wondering where's the next charm, because this as a cycle is very, very cool. Fugitive Codebreaker is 1 and a red for a 2/1 Goblin Rogue rare with prowess and haste. Mono red stuff. Disguise. All right, it's going to be one of those flip up cards. 5 and a red. The cost is reduced by 1 for each instant or sorcery in your graveyard. When this card is turned face up, discard your hand and draw 3 cards. At some point, I think that this card is better than the third or fourth Bloodthirsty Adversary or third or fourth Charmed Scoundrel, just because this card has the potential to draw 3 cards on it. And obviously that's looking at things going a certain way, ending up in late game, but on its own, it's competing with those cards. It comes like a 2-mana 2/2 haste is slightly better for sure, but the prowess on this does help it keep up. So at some point you play this card, and then if you are able to play it and then flip it and draw 3, it's gravy. It's another option that the thing could do. I'm sure that a couple of these should go in the mono red deck. I'm not positive they will. I don't think red players have to. I think it's gonna get you a few extra points of potential game winningness every 100 games or so. But for those of you who like trying new cards in your red deck, where are you? I've never seen you. And this one is for you. Snarling Gore Hound is a black for a 1/1 menace dog. And whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, surveil 1. I'm mostly excited about this because of Gix. Gix Yawgmoth's Praetor is already helping enable a number of Dimir archetypes and mono black archetypes. They're playing cards like Fairy Dream Thief and especially Deep Cavern Bat. If everybody's running the bat, then what is a perfect accompaniment to the bat? This Gorehound comes down on turn 1 and sets it up so that when the bat enters the battlefield, you also get some sweet surveil value on top of your batness. So unless you can find a better 1-drop in the color combination, this seems like an absolutely excellent curve up and leading to your Gix, which then draws you a bunch of cards off it to replace it. So yeah, I believe that Snarling Gorehound will find a place maybe as a 1 or 2 of in either a mono black deck or maybe in a black red or blue black deck as well. Outrageous Robbery. CGB, these all seem like very nice stapley cards with obviously good utility, but where is the fun? Well, if your idea of fun is punching a mirror and making people not want to play Magic with you anymore, if you want to see a straight up rage scoop, I've got that for you. This is Outrageous Robbery. For X black, you have an instant at rare that says target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. You may cast a spell this way. You may spend mana as though it were any mana to cast it. Here's the pitch. Is the card good? Probably not, because what it is Silver Scrutiny, but you're drawing from the wrong deck. Usually the cards in your opponent's deck are not as good for you as they are for them, and not as good as cards from your own deck would be. So at its core, this isn't exactly what you want to be doing. Why are we covering it then? Because the opponent doesn't necessarily know that or care. They are simply going to scoop before you get to cast their cards. So playing this in a control deck, think an Esper Shell or a Dimir Shell, where it is the win con. We stay alive, we stay alive, we stay alive, we stabilize after a board wipe or something like that, and then we tap out on end step for a large outrageous robbery. And if that doesn't work, we'll do it again in a turn or two, and then we'll draw another one. I think that this is a very silly kind of fun win con. Is it actually the best thing to be doing? No. I think for the reasons I outlined, it's not actually a great card, but I think it will be way more effective than it should be based on how much people hate to have this done to them. Fester Leech is 1 black for a 1/1 zombie leech uncommon. When it deals combat damage to a player, you mill 2 cards. For 1 and a black, this gets +2/+2 until end of turn, activate only once each turn. This is going to fill your graveyard a bit. And it's going to be very effective because the opponent won't want to waste a removal spell on a 1/1, but they also can't block it effectively because every turn it's the implication, it's the threat that you will activate it. So I think that Fester Leech will probably mill like about 4 cards if it comes down on turn 1, and that can be good enough. As the game gets longer, yeah, you're going to want to use that ability a little bit more, and you do have a 3/3, so it scales all right. I think that this will have a deck that it certainly belongs in, and I think it'll do its job there. It'll be a role player and nothing to write home about, but role players like this are needed to make decks that are graveyard reliant, like Gather Evidence, or just zombie themed, good. These role players are absolutely essential. Intrude on the Mind is 3 blue for an instant. It's mythic. Here we go. Reveal the top 5 of your library. Separate them into 2 piles. An opponent chooses 1 pile. Put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Create a 0/0 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each card put into your graveyard this way. So it's Factor Fiction, but you make a Thopter. And it's 1 mana more. Is that standard good enough in 2024? I'm not sure. And there's also a notable difference with Intrude on the Mind. The opponent chooses which pile goes into your hand. You do not. It's actually the opposite of the Factor Fiction you're thinking of. And how much does that change everything? I'm going to have to try this. I don't see it replacing Memory Deluge. I do see it being a very interesting card that creates card advantage and board presence, and it's going to be fun to try out in a control deck. I would not be surprised if at the end of the day this is a don't craft and a total trap playing on the Factor Fiction at home nostalgia. This might be a true evil, nasty trap card, but watch the channel. I'm sure we're going to try to play it now and then, and you'll get an idea for just how effective this card can be. Unyielding Gatekeeper is 1 white for a 3/2 Elephant Cleric. Yeah, rare. Disguise, 1 and a white. I'm not high on many of the disguise cards, but I think this one might make it because of this ability. When it's turned face up, exile another non-land permanent. If you control it, return to the battlefield tapped, so you blinked it. Otherwise, its controller creates a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. Being able to exile any permanent, any other non-land permanent, that's the only restriction, it's non-land. Anything else on the battlefield, the opponent gets a detective, but you have a 3/2, or you flicker your own thing. This card has a lot of utility, but my goodness, it's expensive. You have to play it face down. You have to spend your turn 3 playing a 2/2. That doesn't seem very good. And then you do have to flip it up. The disguise is 1 and a white, so you might have some mana to do something else that turn. But my goodness, the flexibility, the ability to nail just about anything. It's both an exciting card and a card I don't think will be good. It's somewhere in the middle of both of those things. I wouldn't craft it right now, but we're going to try it out because I think that if a disguise card is really going to cut it, I think this is the one with the best shot. Doorkeeper Thrall is 1 and a white for a 1/2 creature thrall rare, flash, flying. Artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you reanimating your portal to Phyrexia on turn 5 using an Invoke Justice or something? Doorkeeper Thrall, your artifacts do nothing. Will it actually see play? Is there enough going on? A Hushbringer at least had lifelink. It also stopped Dye's abilities. The flash was what makes you think that this card can somehow work. But my goodness, it just feels like it has to be so the right card at the right time. And honestly, it's meta dependent. We have to see what kind of meta we have. But the idea of turning off all of the enter the battlefield triggers in the format is pretty exciting. Hitting Atraxa with this, hitting Itali with this, that is we had thought that we couldn't stop those cards when Cavern of Souls got printed, but this attacks on a whole other level. Maybe the Doorkeeper Thrall is the secret to not losing to those cards. Delny in yo, Streetwise Lookout, 2 and a white mythic 2/2 human scout legend. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So first of all, the unblockability already starts to get exciting when you look at cards in the format like Gix or other triggers that go off when you hit the opponent. Now, the idea of a creature of power 2 or less triggering and triggering an additional time, things start to get very exciting. There are enough things, like it's a low to the ground meta. You can just combine this with like a Spirited Companion and already start getting excited. It's also interesting that this combines with Calyx Guided by Fate in a weird way where it moves +1/+1 counters around, but you can keep Calyx at 2 power or less, then it can hit things and you can copy enchantments. There are things that I hope this card can do. Maybe there's a home. Maybe there's a way that this card does something really exciting. But I think that this will probably be super exciting in Commander. So I think that this is closer to a Commander card, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did something in Standard. The closing act for cards that I think will make a huge impact in Standard is Ansrag the Quake Mole. The holy moly itself. 2 and a red-green for an 8/4 legendary creature mole god at Mythic. When Ansrag the Quake Mole becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. What? After this combat, there's an additional combat. What? And then 7 total mana, 3 red, green. Ansrag must be blocked each combat this turn if able. You don't want to block my mole god? I'll make you block my mole god. Insert the holy molies. This card seems to have captured the imagination of everybody from every format, including Standard. Is it good in Standard? Well, first up, 4 mana, 8/4. It's not terrible. That's a lot of punch, but it's also not great. It's not that different from a 4 mana 6/6. And a 4 mana 6/6 with flying and Archfiend of Despair does see some Standard play, so size can matter. But where you start to look at this card and get excited, what if this had haste? It's probably going to kill a number of creatures if anything is even available to block, right? It is very dangerous and it hits for so much damage. So you start thinking of curves in red-green where you play awesome 1-drop, awesome 2-drop, then you play Reckless Stormseeker, and then you play this and you're swinging with it the turn that you play it. Brawh, smash.
Other things that give it indestructible, like Tamio's Safekeeping, become very exciting. I believe it's Hajar, like a Gruul Bodyguard, 2 mana 3/3, sacrifice to give indestructible to a legendary creature, as well as +1/+0. Gets really exciting for this card as well. It is, in my opinion, questionable if this will actually make it in a competitive deck. I'm sure it will see play. But remember, and I'm going to be a little bit of a wet blanket here, dinosaurs looked like they were a standard deck. I haven't played many dinosaurs lately. I might play one a week. And it is fun to think of the card from earlier, Breakout, helping you set up that sweet curve of cards. But I'm not convinced on the holy moly. I am 100% sure I will see this in Commander. It will probably be featured on my Commander show at some time, and I'm excited about that. In Standard, I'm a skeptic. If you are excited about Anzrag the Quake Mole, hit like. And if you are not excited about Anzrag the Quake Mole, hit like. Now, I'm going to present all of you my quick review of the set for Commander, followed by my review of the set for Limited, all right here in one video. So I get to call this the complete set review. Commander card. This is a commander card. Commander card. We made a commander card. Commander card. Better with more players card. Commander card. It's expensive, has to live. Commander card. Does something just kind of cool if it's alive. Commander card. Play it from the command zone if it's legendary. Otherwise, copy other people's commanders and stuff. Commander card, combo card. Commander card. Here is a commander card. That is a commander card. Does it do things when it hits the opponent? That is a commander card, unless it might have haste. Commander card. Here's another commander card. This is your commander card. It's really cool, but it's a commander card. This is also a commander card. I don't even know what it does. This is a commander card because it works with another commander. That's a commander card. It says each player. That's a commander card. This is a commander card. It destroys all artifacts you don't control. That's a commander card. Vein Ripper's a commander card. It's like Blood Artist, but it's too expensive. Massacre Girl's a commander card. She can be your commander and work with old cards that also have Wither. Barbed Servitor's a commander card. People can't attack you when it's untapped. Prophets Edict Memories. Who cares? Commander card. Does infinite combo as commander card. Commander card. It's a tap land. Duh. Now here is a review of the staple cards. These are going to be cards like removal or things that we've kind of seen before. They will go into standard decks. They will be, quote, standard playable, but they don't change the format. They just fill out the format. Red Herring is a 2/2 haste attacker. Maybe you can have a common instead of a mythic bloodthirsty adversary. No More Lies is a mana leak if you have specifically the perfect colors. Assassin's Trophy is a removal spell that ramps the opponent. You'll probably put 1 in green-black. Pick Your Poison is a new take on making people sacrifice in a modal way. This will probably see a little bit of sideboard play. Shocking. Hard-hitting Question is the cheapest fight, not even a fight, a bite spell. So if green actually needs removal and can play removal, it might play this removal. Long Goodbye is kind of a smother type effect, eliminate type of effect, and it can't be countered, which is primarily important because of ward, not actual counter spells. Demand Answers is a little bit of Bitter Reunion, but can also sack an artifact, some cheap, useless blood token to get the effect instead. Novice Inspector is Thraben Inspector 2.0. Lightning Helix is, oh my god, it's Lightning Helix! Reasonable Doubt is a quench, pay 2 more counterspell, but it can also give a creature you control menace, and then it can't be blocked. And there are some creatures that would love menace in the Toxic deck. Maybe your Rafine wants menace. No Witnesses is a Wrath, a board wipe that also might get you to investigate, might get the opponent to investigate. Who investigates? I don't know. Next up, not on my watch, exile target attacking creatures. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes you need an unlimited way to, for 2 mana, remove a thing that happens to be attacking. And Deadly Cover-Up is a 5 mana black Wrath that might let you pay some ridiculous evidence cost to also give people a cranial extraction and exile things from their deck. It's kind of exciting that this can even name basic lands, but I don't think it really changes the format. It's just another cool effect that might get used if you already were in the market for the Wrath. Stay tuned for my limited set review. Limited card. Most of these cards are limited cards. Limited card. This is your set review for limited cards. They all do about the same thing from a standard player's perspective. This is a limited card. 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 Limited.
Case of Gorgon's Kiss. This has a lot of limited card. Complete set review. Check.